Thank you very much. Welcome to the Town of Rocky Mountain House Council meeting for January 3rd, 2023. Happy New Year's. I'm going to call the meeting to order. And 2.1 on the agenda is acknowledgement of Indigenous people. The Town of Rocky Mountain House wishes to acknowledge that the land on which we gather is Treaty 6 territory and a traditional meeting ground and home for many Indigenous peoples, including the Blackfoot, Cree, Saulteaux, Stoney, and Métis. So moving forward in the agenda, adoption of the agenda, 3.1. And was there any changes to the agenda? Councillor Hutchinson?
I just wanted to add the Travel Alberta Roundtable that I had sent emails to this morning in regards to that. Just to add that.
So does that have to go on the next agenda, Mr. Kroos?
Your Mayor, no, Councillor can add to the agenda at this
Okay.
point. So.
Okay, thank you very much. Is there anybody opposed to adding that item on the agenda today? Nope, so that's done. Any other additions or changes? So what number would that be then? New business? 9.2, correspondence for action. And I would like to move 10.4, letter from Honorable Jason Nixon, to 9.3, because he does actually ask us for something. So that's 10.4 to 9.3. Any other changes to the agenda today? Seeing none, could I have a motion to accept the agenda as amended?
I will make the motion to accept the amendment as agended.
Thank you very much. All in favor of that motion? And that's carried. So I'm pleased this morning that we have a delegation from the Recycling Council of Alberta, and I'd like to welcome Christina Seidel and Tammy Burke to Chambers this morning. Welcome. Thank you very much for coming today.
Great, thank you. Good afternoon and Happy New Year to Mayor, Council, and admin. It's great to be here. For the live stream, my name is Tammy Burke, and I'm the Vice Chair of the Recycling Council of Alberta. And we've come today with the Executive Director, Christina Seidel. Christina has put together a very good presentation just to discuss the upcoming, the EPR that has already been implemented, which will be fully implemented by 2025. So I'm going to now, with that, turn the floor over to Christina, and she can go on with her presentation.
Thanks, Tammy. Okay, thanks, Tammy. Hi, everybody. Some of you I know from before. It's nice to be here. I'm excited to be here to talk to you about EPR. We have been waiting for EPR in this province for literally decades, and it's very exciting that now that we have it. So I wanted to have this discussion with you so you can ask whatever questions you have to really understand what your role is and how you want to actually embrace EPR and how things are going to go forward and how it's actually going to impact the town. So feel free through the presentation to stop me if you have any pressing questions as we go. I'm happy to have it be a conversation throughout rather than me just talk and then we'll have questions at the end. We'll do that as well, of course. So the Recycling Council of Alberta, most of you know who we are. So we are a nonprofit group. We're actually a registered charity, and we're all about reducing waste and ultimately having a circular economy in Alberta. So extended producer responsibility is what we're going to be talking about today. And if we look at the definition, this really is the most significant development in our industry, honestly, for years. So it makes a big difference, and it's going to make a big difference to municipalities for sure, and it's also going to make a big difference to producers. So the actual definition of EPR, essentially, if you just summarize it, is that it's no longer municipalities' responsibility to take care of all the waste. It is now the responsibility of the producer who created the waste in the first place, as in those who manufactured it. They are now ultimately responsible to make sure that that waste is properly managed, which is a game changer in the industry, because traditionally what's happened is really municipalities had no influence over what was produced in terms of materials products, but at the end of the day, you were stuck with having to manage the waste. So that is why this is such a game changer in terms of policy. So there's a number of benefits of EPR that are definitely we're going to see as the programs are implemented across the country. So the big thing is, as I just said, it takes that responsibility and it transfers it, both in terms of operations and financial responsibility, transfers from municipalities and taxpayers to the producers who are making the material in the first place. Now, what this means is it actually is a big financial gain. So some of the calculations that we've done suggest that it will actually save municipalities in Alberta, just for packaging and printed paper, will save municipalities more than $100 million a year. That's how this is going to make that kind of financial difference. Yes.
Are those numbers based on what's produced right now? Oh, I'm sorry. Are those numbers based on what's produced right now and extrapolated from there? Because I'm just curious how
Yes.
they come up with that.
Yeah, no, it's based on the materials that are generated in the province today, and looking also at what it costs municipalities today to manage materials. So it's looking at those two pieces and doing the math, essentially, that if you didn't have to handle those materials anymore, how much money will it save you?
Yeah, and so do you have data from Ontario and British Columbia that actually do actual costs of what it's changed? Yeah, okay.
Yes, those numbers have been done for all the provinces across the country. So yes, that is certainly available as well.
Okay, thank
Yeah.
you so much.
You bet.
Christina, can I interrupt? Is it in your presentation, I can't remember, that Alberta is the only province in Canada that does not have an EPR program yet?
Yeah.
We're lagging, but we're excited about it because we do believe Alberta's program is going to be very good once it's fully implemented.
Yeah, it's a good point. Thanks, Tammy. And that's why we've been so excited and lobbying for this for so many years, because we have been a little bit behind the 8 ball on this. So as I was saying about producers, so what it does is, because the producer's now responsible to make sure that they're properly handling the material that they're generating, what it does is it gives them a trigger to change things that they never had before. Because basically producers had no reason, they honestly didn't care what they put on the marketplace, other than from a marketing standpoint and a financial standpoint. So now, because they have to manage those materials, they pay a bit more attention to what they're actually producing, to think about what's going to happen to this material at the end of its life. They didn't have to think about that before. So that can make a big difference in terms of design, that they can change what they actually produce. It also encourages, as I mentioned, that we advocate for circular economy. Well, the EPR is a key piece to circular economy, and the reason for that is because with the producers being in the equation, they not only are managing the materials or responsible for managing the materials, but they also have the opportunity then to take the material back and reintegrate it into their own system, and we're already starting to see that happen. It also...
I'm gonna just go to Councillor Boniface has a
Oh, sorry,
question.
I didn't see
No,
that.
that's my job.
Okay,
I just
perfect.
wanted to catch you when you had a breath.
So what you're saying is this is going to be the companies that are generating, the manufacturer is going to be responsible for this. So if we're the only province that hasn't had this in play, why is there the same amount of waste generated in other provinces? Manufacturers are, somebody's shipping batteries. I bought a pack of batteries the other day and they're like triple packaged. You can buy the same package in BC, the same package in Saskatchewan. Manufacturers in China are not going to change things because Alberta's made a rule. Isn't this going to be downloaded onto consumers even more than that already is?
Yeah, you know what, there's a couple of key things that are in your question. One of them is, because we were the only province that didn't have EPR, we actually have already been paying for EPR because producers, manufacturers set their prices across the country. So we pay the same price essentially that consumers pay in other provinces, even though we don't have the benefits. So that's one point that's important. And you're right in terms of the economies of scale, that's why it's really important that the country as a whole, and ultimately, hopefully North America as a whole, actually has the same rules. It has much more influence than in terms of design. Your question is a very good point, that if you're a small or you're a small jurisdiction like Alberta, you're unlikely to actually have a significant change on the design of a lot of products. But if you do it as a whole country, it's much more likely that it's going to happen. And because the producers now actually physically are responsible to collect that material, they are already changing design to do that. So just because things are made in China, for example, it still might be Procter & Gamble that's actually paying for the material to be made, and so they are going to ask for something different because they know it's going to land on their doorstep at the end of its life. But it's a completely fair question, and it's valid in terms of we need to make sure that we're paying attention to those things. Consistency is another thing that right now, if you go to a different, like if you just go, let's say go to Sylvan Lake and look at what their recycling program is, I can guarantee you it's different than it is here. This is going to change that because this is going to be a provincial approach now. So you're going to see similar rules across the province, which is another benefit to EPR. And because, again, we have the economies of scale, that it's much more likely that we're going to have better markets for the materials than we have historically had. So those are just some of the benefits. So as I mentioned, we are the last province to really bring EPR on. And so now that we have EPR, we have essentially two programs that are being adopted. One of them is packaging and printed products. So that is number one, and we're going to talk about these separately. And there's also then hazardous and special products. And that's what you would see today as HHW. So HHW is also going to be covered under EPR now. PPP is the big one. That's the $100 million one. HHW is smaller, but it's also important because they're problematic materials that are difficult to manage. So the order in council was approved this fall, and the regulation actually came into force at the end of November. So the regulation is now in force in Alberta, and it will be fully implemented by spring of 2025. Sorry, there we go. So some of the basics. What does this mean? One thing that is happening is in Alberta, which is different from some of the other jurisdictions like BC, in Alberta, the government is not going to be providing hands-on oversight of the programs. That's just not the way we do things in Alberta. In BC, it is the government that actually oversees the programs to make sure that they're operating the way they should. In Alberta, it's now going to actually be ARMA that is going to be providing that oversight because Alberta Environment will not be playing that role. But remember, it is only oversight that ARMA is going to be playing. ARMA has nothing to do with the actual delivery of the programs itself, like on the ground. So ARMA is an oversight body. As a result, producers have to be registered with ARMA in order to be able to sell materials into the province. So producers are responsible to make sure that they follow the regulation, and that means that they have to make sure that the materials are properly collected across the province, which means that they need to negotiate deals with either municipalities, and this is where you could come in, or private service providers. So it's going to be up to municipalities, honestly, at the end of the day, whether you want to run your programs or whether you want to turn them over to the producers so that they can run them. And that's what happened in BC, and that is very likely what's going to happen here. So if you don't want to be in the waste management business anymore in terms of recycling, you can just back away from that and the producers will have to do it. So the producers, which are groups again, they tend to be brand owners that bring the products and the materials into the province. So they can actually be represented by what's called producer responsibility organizations. And these are basically just groups where the producers get together. They're not all going to do their own thing. There's way too many of them. So they form a PRO that then makes sure that they meet the regulations on behalf of all of their members. So watch for that as this comes through, because you're going to start to hear from some of the producer responsibility organizations. There may be one, there may be multiple for the materials. So what's the role for municipalities? Municipalities are absolutely key stakeholders because you have been running the system to this point. So you're absolutely a key player, a key stakeholder. It's critical that you stay informed through this whole process, and that you then make sure that your wishes are made known so that you can have proper negotiations with the producers, and also that you really understand what all the implications of the regulations are. So you're going to be able to negotiate with the producers to have whatever role it is that you want to play. But at the same time, you will also still play a role as a municipality with other municipalities through groups like Alberta Municipalities, for example, is still playing a strong advocacy role in terms of making sure that these programs roll out the way that they want to see them roll out. So those are some of the things that you're going to see happen for municipalities. So what does it look like then for, as I said, PPP, which is packaging and paper products, but also lumped into this is single-use products. We don't know exactly how that's going to play out yet, but that is definitely part of this regulation as well. So you'll just see here on the screen, you'll see packaging-like products. So anything that's a package is included essentially. There's a list of a whole bunch of them there. But there's also paper products. So that's things like newspapers, catalogs, that kind of thing is also included under PPP. And then single-use products as well. This only applies to residential. It does not apply to ICI. Let me just postpone this. There we go. So what this means is that if you look at the materials that are generated in the commercial sector, those are not covered under this regulation. It is only residential. It also does not cover materials that are already covered under existing other regulations that are managed already by ARMA and BCMB. So things like tires, electronics, paint, and oil are not covered under this regulation because they're already under a previously existing regulation. There's also an exemption for charities, and there's also an exemption for small business. So that's something that they do partly for convenience, but also partly because they don't want to create any hardship on these organizations.
Do you mean charities that are producing it?
Charities, yes, charities that might be able to be counted as producers are not part of this. So you're right, it's not that many of them anyway, but if you're a charity and you would be a producer, you're exempt because you're a charity.
Okay, thank you.
So collection requirements, by April 2025, these programs need to be in operation. So producers need to have met their targets as of 2025 in the spring. This is only though for municipalities that already have a program. If a municipality does not have a recycling program yet, the producers get a buy for a year. So that won't happen until 2026 if there's no existing program. Now the system has to provide for collection every 2 weeks, and if it's curbside, or they also have to provide the same level of service if it's a depot collection as opposed to curbside collection. So basically the bottom line there is it's expected that the same level of service that you're receiving today will be at least that level of service going forward under EPR.
Sorry, Christina.
Yes.
And what about the combination of depot and curbside?
Yeah, that's going to come in some of the details. Basically, level of service will stay the same. So if you have both, it's very likely you will still have both, and that will be the requirement.
I have a counselor with another question.
Oh, yes.
So is this looking similar to, say, the bottle depot, where you would have somebody would set up a recycling depot for these materials, and they would be the ones providing, like Tammy had said, the curbside pickup or the option to drop at a depot?
You know what? That's a level of detail that actually the regulation is silent on. So bottom line is if you look at this slide, so perfect transition to this slide. So this is what the producers have to achieve. If you look at this, they have to achieve very high percentages of recovery rates for materials. That's what's in the regulation. How they do that is up to them. So the regulation is not specific on what exactly the program looks like, other than what I'd said before with it has to be every other week, that level of service. But for what they actually achieve in terms of outcomes, that's in the regulation. So how they do that is honestly up to them. Now, we can look to other jurisdictions that have already implemented this to have a good idea of how it's probably going to happen. And bottom line is it's probably not going to be a lot different than what it is now, other than it will be more consistent, it will be, and more aggressive, so there'll be more material collected. But it's not like you're going to have not like everything's going to go to like a bottle depot type system. No, it'll be more like what we have today. And remember, bottle depots are captured under the previous regulations, so they're not actually covered in this anyway. So you'll see some of these very aggressive numbers. So by 2027, you can see we already have to get 80% of paper products out. That's the target that the producers have to meet. So these are very aggressive targets. So you're going to see they're going to take this very seriously. And this is why you're going to see some pretty enhanced recycling, I think, across the province, because in order for them to meet these numbers, they have to have pretty intense programs to actually make this happen. So you're going to see some very serious moves, I think, from the producers, and you're going to be part of those conversations in one way or another. So this is how much material is recycled, and that's important. It's recycled, it's not just collected. So the numbers, if you collect a material, that doesn't count. It has to actually be, you have to have evidence that it's actually recycled. So that's an improvement beyond some of the things we see now too. Because right now, if you have a contractor, for example, that collects your material, you have no real assurance that that material is being recycled. You know it's been collected, but you don't know exactly whether or not it's being recycled.
In the city of Toronto.
Yes, a lot of municipalities just don't really have any idea. And you see the numbers then go up to as high as 95% for paper products in 2023. So again, very aggressive targets that should lead to stronger recycling programs.
Now, are these based on federal laws, or this is through the EPA for Alberta? This chart?
This is all Alberta. So this is within the regulation that Alberta Environment passed, yes. So you're going to have slightly different targets in different jurisdictions because, again, waste is a provincial jurisdiction. So all EPR programs are provincial, not national.
So if they don't follow this chart, does it mean that they have an added cost to those products that they're producing and they get charged a fee? I'm familiar with how the eco fees work and that, but is that the plan then? Because I'm just, for example, I'm familiar with, as a retailer, how many vendors I have, which would be different producers. And right now, the Recycling Council of Alberta, or whatever the umbrella is for paints and oils
Arma.
and stuff.
Yep.
Yeah, they've changed it because it used to be the Recycling Council of Alberta. That's how I used to have it signed I'm old though. So I used to have to sign the sheet every year. Because I used to have to be a member of that for
Yeah.
selling electronics. But anyways, doesn't matter. I'm just imagining that I have, and I'm just one retailer, one retailer out of all the retailers, saying, for example, Rocky Mountain House, there's, say, 100 different retailers. Out of those 100, there might be, 1,000 producers. How is that getting collected by the Alberta government then? Do they go to the, for the producers? Because I'm buying materials from a vendor, right? And they're buying it from a producer. How is the Alberta government tracking what's produced and brought into the province to get the money to offset these fees?
Okay, no, fair. And first of all, I want you to forget ARMA ever existed.
Okay.
Because they have not, other than, it actually freaked us out when they became the oversight body because it just makes it confusing because they have nothing to do with the actual operation of the system. So bottom line is these are the targets that the producers have. So they have to report in to the oversight body, which is ARMA in this case. In BC, it's the provincial government, but it's ARMA. They have to report how much material is sold into the province every year.
Okay.
And then based on those sales numbers, then they calculate what they have to get for recovery rates.
Okay.
And that's why you get the pros, because you're absolutely right. You're talking thousands of producers. That's why you have producer responsibility organizations that act on behalf of all those thousands of producers. And they're the ones then that bring those numbers together to say, okay, based on what we've recovered or what we've actually collected for recycling, compare it to our sales numbers. This is the actual recycling rate that we achieve for this year. So that all happens at that pro level and then gets verified by ARMA as the oversight body. But there is no money being collected by the government. I'm going to be clear on that. They have a target, producers have a target, it's up to them to achieve it. The money never changes hands related to the government. The government has nothing to do. All the government cares about is that they actually meet their targets.
But I thought part of this EPR was that when Procter & Gamble makes a product, the consumer pays 10 cents extra for the bottle, and it gets called the EPR fee.
No, that's ARMA again. That's stewardship. That's why EPR is a game changer. There isn't any of that happening anymore. All they're worried about is hitting their targets. They pay internally, they internalize the cost to make sure that the programs exist and are funded. So the producers pay for them to make sure that happens. And if you look, for example, at a package, if you were to actually try to charge a fee on a package, because obviously when you have something like a computer, you charge a fee because it's a much more expensive thing to recycle. But if you're going to recycle a Shreddies box, that's going to be a fraction of a penny. You are never going to see any increase of costs, and you are never going to see a fee.
Well, I thought that's how it was explained to us at a Zoom meeting last year. at
Yeah, shouldn't have been.
Christmas.
Yeah, shouldn't have been, because they're,
Okay.
again, they actually can't, there is no way for them to actually charge for that because it's too small.
Okay, so how, they're just doing the total amount of merchandise brought in versus the amount of garbage that we're consuming? They're coming up with a number, and then they're setting targets on that?
Well, no, they know how much material is being sold in the province.
Right.
So then that's the denominator, and then the amount that's collected for recycling is the numerator, and the ratio between the two is the recycling rate.
Oh, okay.
That's what these numbers are, is the recycling rate.
Just trying to figure out where these numbers are coming from and how we're gonna,
And you know what?
Yeah.
It is inevitably complicated because of how many different products there are, absolutely. And another reason why, if you're gonna focus on something, focus on the actual outcomes, the numbers that they're expected to achieve, and then focus on how much, if you're gonna continue to run your own program, focus on how much subsidy you're gonna get from the producers to run that program. Those are the key things for you, really.
so how are we gonna, asks my next question, how are we gonna ensure that we've negotiated a good deal and we have consistency across Alberta if we don't have one body that's telling us all what we need to negotiate? Like, I could negotiate a deal with, say, for example, TELUS, and the Council of Sylvan Lake maybe have a better deal. Like, that puts a lot of onus on our municipality to make a good deal that, on stuff that it's not generally in my area of expertise. What, like, and so when are we gonna have to do this by? April of 2025?
Yeah, and I think what's gonna happen though is I predict this year you're already gonna have producers knocking on your door to try to start to have those conversations. And so you need to be thinking already, what role do you want to play going forward? Do you still want to run your own recycling system? Probably not. Then it's easy for you to just walk away and say, we have nothing to do with this anymore. In which case, you don't have to negotiate anything because the producers are responsible to make that happen. If you want to still run it because you think you need to play that role for your residents, then you have to negotiate with the producers to decide how much they're going to pay you to continue to run a program.
How many producer bodies are out there right now that we're gonna have to negotiate with?
My prediction is one.
You think there's just one?
Yes.
One
Yes.
group with
Yes.
all the producers in it?
Yes. For PPP, yes. I believe that will be the case. Even Ontario has just 3, I think. So it's very likely that you will end up with one. The name of the pro is Circular Materials, and that is very likely going to be the one that you're going to be negotiating with.
Christina, can you just touch on, just briefly, BC, when they started out, British Columbia, they started out as the municipalities wanted to do their own program, and then soon that changed. And are the majority now of municipalities in British Columbia letting another major pro take it over?
It was, BC is a very interesting example because they were the first ones to really take on EPR for PPP. Sorry for all the acronyms, it's crazy. So BC is a good one to look at in terms of how the systems can evolve, because when they first introduced EPR, everybody was suspicious. They said, well, we don't know if this is going to work, and we don't know if we're going to get the right service to our residents. So a number of municipalities actually said, you know what, we're hanging on to our own program. You can subsidize us, but we need to run this program because we don't trust you to run it. I totally get that. I don't think I would have either. So, but in the meantime, since then, it has changed to the point where the largest municipality, the city of Vancouver, has backed away from recycling and has turned that system over completely to the producers. Said, we're not in this game anymore. You know what, we can use our, we can use that part of our budget for something else, and we can save our taxpayers a bunch of money. So that's how that system has evolved, likely to be the case in Alberta as well. But you absolutely have the option of, you could even just say, you know what, we don't want to be any part of this. That would be kind of crazy, because you'd be turning away money, essentially.
Yes, so when we, like, I think Councillor Phillips and I both took that, there was a couple seminars like a year ago, and there was one that said, like, when we're renegotiating our contracts for recycling pickup and, like our subcontracts, to make sure that there's exit clauses in there so that when
Yep.
this comes, we don't have to pay a fee to get it. I mean, there was a couple of things that we discussed last year. So I'm just concerned, that when we took that course, they said they used, Alberta's going to learn from BC's mistake is basically
Yeah.
what the course said, and that's why
Yeah.
it's taken an extra year longer. And I want to know how it's going to work, but it's not there yet, right?
Yeah, but you do have to be cautious, absolutely. So you need to, going into this, that's where the conversations with the pros or pro are going to be important, so that you actually make sure that you are getting the deal that you want, essentially. Because basically what you're doing is you're flipping it. You're flipping it to suddenly you are now going to be the contractor. The pro is the one that's actually going to be hiring you if you want to play that role. Which is the opposite of what you've traditionally done with waste management, where you've hired the contractor. So it's a different way of looking at it, for sure.
Okay. I think Councillor Hutchinson has a question.
I had two questions, comments. The first one was on enforcement of this program, how, if they're not meeting these PPP targets, whose role is it? And is there any examples, like with other provinces, and how they've gone about doing that?
It's a very good question, because if you don't have enforcement, you're not going to have a successful program. Although it's interesting that this is one thing that honestly BC has not done very well, to be totally honest, is they have not really enforced things as much as they could. But it's quite interesting how producers take this very seriously. So part of the reason BC hasn't had to have a lot of enforcement is because generally the producers have met their targets. So I think everybody was worried that they'd sign on and then not actually take it seriously, but they took it very seriously. We are seeing other jurisdictions, though, like Quebec. Quebec actually has financial penalties that they will impose if somebody does not meet their targets. So exactly what Alberta will do, that is not in the regulation, so we don't know exactly how the enforcement piece will look. But that's another role, again, in terms of how you make sure that your voice is heard. That's the kind of question that will come to a group like Alberta Municipalities. They're going to try to make sure that that happens the way that it should.
Now, I also was wondering, touching on the blue bins. So we're in the process, or we're in the start, the first phase of that. Municipalities across province already have their blue bin program in place and have spent the money on the bins. What is that, or do you have any idea how that's going to be looking for municipalities who spent money on the bins? Will the producers be utilizing those? Do we have any, because like I said, we're at the point, do we spend the money, don't spend the money?
Don't spend the money. That's craziness. Because you are not going to be doing the service yourself, which means you have to have somebody that can use that particular bin to provide the service. Why would you buy a bin? Because the producers can buy the bins. Like, honest, I would not be doing that, that's for sure. I mean, that's a lot of money, and you don't know if that's gonna be, the real danger, and I think you heard about this, I'm sure, on that one, the one webinar.
There's so many things.
Stranded assets is a very real danger in this, because what you're doing is you're changing the players in the system. So if the actual provider of the service changes, so that if it's not you and it's somebody else, you could be stuck with bins.
Did you have kind of, give us a picture of what the other provinces are doing, or does that just entirely depend on who the, if it's Circular Materials that are doing the pickup,
Yep.
whatever they choose?
So Circular Materials is just basically overseeing the system and making sure the system happens province-wide and then negotiates with the municipalities. So what's happening is some of the municipalities that were providing the service themselves, as in actually have trucks and drive around and pick up stuff. Some of those are still doing that, and in that case, then they get subsidized to do that. If they have bins then, and they're gonna continue to do that, that makes sense. But then other municipalities hire contractors that go out and collect the materials. That's gone, because those then, to be a provincial system, what's happened is, for example, in BC, one company gets hired to be the service provider across the whole province. So that's much more likely. Remember, producers are very cheap. They wanted, shouldn't say cheap, they try to be very efficient. So you're not going to get a whole bunch of small service providers providing the service across the province. What you're going to get is, for those municipalities that are not doing it themselves, you're much more likely to get a very small number of service providers that are bigger, providing those services in multiple municipalities as negotiated by the producers.
So I have a question on the follow-up of that. So on your previous slide, it said that if we don't have any program in place, then we don't get help to provide the program?
For
Is that-
one more year.
Okay, but if we already have a 2-week, then whomever has to come and ensure.
Yes.
And so that they would subsidize it, or they would provide the service that we're providing at the same level, and that level would be 2 weeks. So would it not be okay to keep providing a recycling pickup service every 2 weeks, knowing that because we're providing it, it has to continue to be provided for?
Oh, absolutely. And in fact, it's fantastic that you already have a program, because by having a program, you have ensured that you will be under the new system by the spring of 2025.
Okay.
That's a bonus. If you didn't, it wouldn't be till 2026.
So, but the problem that you're suggesting in answering Councillor Hutchinson's question is that we are just we're just putting our numbers together to purchase the blue bins, and we subcontract out the collection to company X, say. After all this comes in 2025, company X might not be
Correct.
providing the service anymore.
Yep.
And the blue bins that we've invested our capital money in might not be adequate, or because company X is now gone and it's going to be Circular Materials will have some subcontractors
Yep.
that the producers are going to hire.
Yep.
So your recommendation right now would be not to buy any blue bins of any kind, just keep doing our program as it is?
Yep. It honestly would be, because and not that many municipalities actually own their own bins necessarily anyway. If you hire a service provider, they usually provide the bins themselves, and they have gazillions of them. So the idea of you owning your own bins, I just think the timing is not good.
I want to buy you I have a cupcake in my office. I'm going to go get it for you after this presentation and give it to you, because it was a significant capital investment.
Yep.
That we thought, well, we're following along, being prepared
Nope.
for EPR to come in, and it's really now going to be a
Yep.
waste of money if we don't
Yeah.
change our direction on that,
Yeah.
and just keep doing some sort of a program where they provide the bins.
That is honestly what I would do, just because you don't know who's going to be providing that service in 2 years.
Does anybody else want to hug her? Can we just have thank you so much for coming, because that is a piece of information we desperately, value. Thank you so much for, okay, so yeah, so.
Okay.
That answered that, thank you. While we're at a spot, do you think that the consumer has a lot to do with the success of the program? For example, I know consumers in BC are a totally different creature than a consumer in Alberta or Ontario, or, And that the reason that it's been so successful is because the consumers are putting pressure on the producers because they just won't buy things that aren't recyclable.
I wish that was the case.
Okay.
I honestly, the consumer, this has been one of our issues forever, is that producers put whatever into the marketplace they want to. They always say, oh, we only do what our consumers want.
Yeah.
No, they
okay.
don't. They're always inventing things that have to be, and then they persuade the consumers that they need it.
Okay.
You know, obviously they provide what consumers want as well, but I wish that was the case,
Okay.
but I don't feel like it is.
It was sort of an off conversation. I
That's
was just
fine.
curious about that.
Okay, so just very quickly, sorry, because I know we have limited time. So the other one is again, hazardous and special products. So these are all the materials that you collect under HHW right now. So that is a separate, this will be a separate pro because the actual expertise to deal with these materials are obviously very different from packaging. So very likely, your service provider, or your pro for this will likely be a company called Product Care. They provide pro services for these materials across most of the country already. So these are all things that'll be collected. Again, you'll see here the requirements. So basically it depends on the size, your population will determine how many drop-off points or how many actual roundups you have per year. So you guys will fall under having to have at least one roundup a year that will be actually covered by the pro that does these programs. If you have a permanent collection site, you would keep your permanent collection site. And because HHW is completely different, they can't, and most of the materials, like think about paint, how in the world do you set a target for paint? Because under the right situation, paint is all used. So you don't want to have a bunch of paint left over anyway. So the only requirements are actually for batteries. So they have percentages of batteries similar to packaging that have to be collected. But other than this, it's more about a service is what it is, so that the service level will be enough that you can get these materials out of your waste stream. So that's sorry, it's really short on special products because it's very different and it's a lot simpler. So that's the scoop on EPR, and this is a big deal and it is complicated, but at the same time, we want to make sure that we get it right so that it performs the way it should, but also so that it provides the benefits that you guys get back what you should, which means that you shouldn't be responsible for paying for all of this anymore. And that's a huge benefit for municipalities.
I'm going to go to Councillor Phillips. Got some questions?
Yes, so with all the new changes coming and, municipalities having to deal with this individually and each one probably doing them differently, would this be something that we may look at going to Alberta municipalities with a resolution, asking them to assist the municipalities to sort all of this out, as opposed to each individual municipality having to do it on their own?
And that is already happening, actually. Alberta Municipalities has created I think they call it a task force. I should know this because I sit on it. Yeah. So they've created a task force that's going to do exactly that, which is going to look at, for the sake of municipalities, what's the best way that this should happen. And so that task force will be helping Alberta Environment through the implementation phase to make sure that things roll out the way that they should. So absolutely, and again, you want to stay as connected to that as possible because they want to make sure that they're representing all municipalities.
And does that include RMA as well?
They're
Or just-
rural, so there's two.
Yes.
It does include RMA.
The task force,
Yeah,
I think so.
I believe there is RMA on the
There has
task
to be
force as well.
RMA on it. Yeah, because I know
Because-
RMA is very involved, so they have to be on that task force.
Because when you think about it, the collection site could be a regional collection site. So,
Yeah.
Did you have another follow-up?
No, that was it.
So I just had two more questions. So my biggest question is, because last year when I took that course, that they gave some recommendations in order to prepare. I wish I had a bigger list. We were aware of if we were renewing contracts with our service providers, make sure there's an exit
Yep.
clause. What other recommendations do you have for us as a municipality in order to, do you have a list of 10 things that we need to do in order to be prepared for 2025 April? You know what I mean? So that we are, you're giving us the warning. Do you have
Yep.
the list of?
Yeah, you know what? That's actually a fair question. We don't have a list per se, I think because everybody's a little bit different, but I think generally the best recommendation is stay the course. Don't make any big changes, because it's so imminent now that, basically just really stay tuned and be there at the table to be part of those negotiations. But in terms of, I certainly wouldn't be quick to make any sort of big program changes, because again, as those programs become consistent across the province, this is not the time for you to be sort of going out into left field, for sure, because you're going to end up being essentially the same as other communities if this rolls out the way that it should. So again, stay the course, I would say. Don't do, and don't make any big commitments. That is for sure.
Okay. Yeah, because we've had some huge changes in our community, both in our municipality, like in our town, and in our surrounding municipal district. Are you going to be giving this presentation to the county of Clearwater as well?
I have not been invited there yet, so I do not know the answer to that.
Oh, well.
Where are you going now? Drayton, a few other municipalities for sure, but.
Yeah, definitely. There's a lineup of municipalities that want to have this discussion, so we will be continuing to do this for sure.
Yeah, I think, we used to have really good partnerships with them, and this is a good, I mean, because we used to have partnerships and we've had all these big changes, then they're gonna have big changes too, and they need the warning. I just feel like they need the warning as well, to just be cautious of what investment they're gonna do if all these
Yep.
things are coming down the pipe, right?
And they should be following RMA as well, just like, I would
Yeah.
really suggest following AEM municipalities.
Yep.
And reading their emails and attending any seminars you possibly can, and that
Yeah.
would be my advice as well to counties through RMA.
Yeah, we attend both, we just,
Right.
yeah, we attend both because sometimes,
Right.
and we're in partnership with so many things that they do. Well, I really appreciate your time. Did we tick all your boxes of things you wanted to tell us?
No,
Okay.
that was great. Thank you. Thank you
Okay.
very much. And if you think of other questions after, and I know this was a lot to dump on you in one presentation, so, feel free to reach out to me anytime.
Okay.
You too, Dean, if anything comes up, happy to try to assist in any way that we can. And we will be playing that role with that task force of trying to represent our member municipalities, so feel free.
Okay, thank you so much.
You
I
are
really
welcome.
appreciate it. I see no other questions. Thank you again.
Thanks, everybody. Have a good afternoon. Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks, Christina. Thanks, Tammy.
So moving forward in the agenda, up next, we have a delegation from Clearwater Regional Family and Community Services with Andrea Vasello. And I'm drawing a blank. Rebecca Zazula. Thank you, Rebecca. I'm so sorry. I'm just like, I know who that is. Yeah, no, not your name though today. Thank you so much for coming.
Good afternoon, Mayor Bache and honorable council members. We're happy to be with you today. I'm Andrea Vasello, the manager of the FCSS program, and I'm here today with Rebecca, who's the program and volunteer coordinator. So we put together a presentation for you today. Thank you, Tiffany, for queuing us up. So this is our office currently right now. When you walk in, it's just next door in Post House main level, which we made the change recently, and we find that's really good and accessible for our clients, especially those who are more vulnerable, who come from the food bank, the Friendship Center, and the library. So our famous beaver there is new to the office this year. It's a hit. There's Rebecca and I, and that's our trade show setup. So we provide a lot of information, referrals, and updates to various clients. There's been a lot of downloading, especially as of late from the pandemic. There's been a lot of people slipping through the cracks as office doors have been closed and as everything is moving towards an online format. A lot of folks don't have a phone or internet, and so we're there to help them out. It's not our program, but we do help people. So what is FCSS? It's an 80-20 split between the province and the municipality. So it's a cost-sharing program, and we definitely get more bang for our buck putting in 20 to get the 80. And there's just 2 of us in the program, and we're primarily a granting agency, but we do also internal programs, one of which is the Volunteer Center, and I'll let Rebecca
So we have,
Rebecca, I'm just going to ask you to push your mic on. There, thank you.
you're welcome, thanks. So we have, at the Volunteer Center, we have a monthly newsletter that goes out letting the community members and the volunteer registry know what's going on in the community and any volunteer opportunities that are available. We have a newcomer welcome package that goes out with any newcomers that's sitting at the, what's it called, chamber. And they hand those out to new residents. And then for volunteer placements, we have high school kids, we have people getting back into the workforce, seniors, just anybody that really wants to help out and give back to the community. So all sorts of commitments all year round. And we do volunteer appreciation and recognition. Formerly, we did the gala, and then throughout COVID, we had to adapt. And since then, we've noticed we're able to appreciate way more volunteers by spreading it out throughout the whole week and doing a variety of activities. And we were able to appreciate over 140 people last year, so that was really nice. Another program that utilizes volunteers, as well as our work experience student and myself, is the Volunteer Income Tax Program. We started that off in 2018, and it's just progressively grown each year. This past year, we've had a over 30% increase. So we do taxes for free for people of modest income, over a third of which are typically seniors in our region, and it helps put back money into our region for people to access resources and whatnot. And this year was over just under 3.1 million back into our region.
Which is awesome. So we focus on preventing further crisis in the individual and family, so we're a preventative social service. We also extend that to other local nonprofits. So here's just a snapshot of a few that we fund. We tend to do year to year to keep them open, their doors open to the public. So in Caroline, we have the Neighborhood Place there. We've got the Play School Society there, the hub that provides before and after school care and no school days. We've helped out the Filipino Association. I most recently went to their Christmas party and it was great. I highly recommend it next year if anybody wants to go. We helped out the Rocky Skate Park Committee, which is quite new and a grassroots initiative of parents of kids, and then they've actually sort of hit a high need area and helped the kids that are slipping through the cracks without that parental supervision. The Asoquin Friendship Center for their recent men's forum in November. The Clearwater Boys and Girls Club really heavily relies on us. So does the West Country Family Service Association, and they provide home support and lifeline and other programs to seniors in the area. And lastly, the Family Wellness Program through the Wildrose School Division, which they've been extremely busy through COVID because, of course, the kids are an indicator of what's going on at home with the parents. So Seniors Week is another topic that falls under Rebecca's work portfolio.
Yeah, so this is usually a partnership with various organizations within the region. And it started out just in town as a one-day thing, and it's grown into being spread across the county throughout the entire week, including things like crib and shuffleboard and barbecues, information sessions regarding like Greensleeve and estate planning and things like that.
Also some youth and family programs that Rebecca plays a part in.
I don't even know what's on that one. Okay, so there's the Guys and Girls Unleashed, which Debbie's son's actually come to. And so that's a program that we're running in the summer. This is the second year that the girls will also be involved. So we help the kids learn stress management and build up their resiliency so that they can tackle things better as life gets hard, because that always comes up. Rural Link is a program between the Colarochy Elementary and the Westview Lodge. So we have the leadership group, which is grade 4 and 5 kids. We get together with the seniors at the lodge and they build up their citizenship skills, their friendships, give each other purpose, teach each other new things. And then we do various collaborative programming with different community groups, whether that's out in Condor or Leslieville or even in town, just depending on who wants to work together, such as things like the CHS Day and stuff like that, to raise awareness of what we're doing and reach more people so they can connect with our programming. Yeah, so there's the CHS Day. We've done herbology walks, paint nights. We were partnering with the FRN for DIY Divas, Lego Club, and pop-up awareness events throughout the community. There's more pictures from Unleashed. So we had the fire trucks down there and different things.
And the youth forum, this fell under my work portfolio. We applied for a grant as part of the West Country Drug Coalition. I used to be the chair. And we applied for an Alberta Health Services grant to put an initiative on for youth. And so we gathered a group of youth as an advisory committee. We had 9 youth in total, and we hosted a youth forum last spring. And so the youth decided that they wanted 2 speakers plus breakout sessions where we gathered their information on various topics, their insights on like substance use, homelessness, housing, etc., that are affecting youth today. So we wanted to hear from youth themselves to then take this back to the coalition to help the community. So I did release a report, and I'll be coming later to council to share that with the youth themselves. But we basically put on the event, and then there's going to be a follow-up event. We were approved for a second grant. It was supposed to be a fireside chat this winter, but the youth decided to postpone it to the summer when it's better weather. So we found out some interesting information, but I won't get into that until we come before you at that time. We also do Adulting 101 in FCSS. This is a newer program that's gotten a lot of provincial interest throughout our FCSS programs province-wide.
So there was a need voiced from parents and teachers in the community for kids and a lot of the youth saying they were just honestly terrified to become adults. And they didn't know how to do that. So we started out just small and we're trying to grow it bigger. And the 4 topics that we chose to start with were renter basics, basic mechanic work so that they can get to and from their job or school, budgeting, and then just getting their taxes and doing basic tax returns.
We even had adults asking if they could have an Adulting 101.
Thinking of how many people I know that should take that.
Right? And this is Rural Link again that Rebecca already spoke about.
Yep.
Between the lodge and the elementary students. Anything else you wanted to say about that?
We're just very excited that we're able to go back in person because the 2 years of virtual was really difficult on both sides.
Yeah. We're also a safe supply site for Turning Point Society out of Red Deer, and that's different than a safe use site. So they're not using on site, but they come and they get clean needles, clean pipes, and etc., foil, springs, from our FCSS office, and that's to prevent the spread of infection and disease. And then what we do is we form those relationships of trust with the clients. So often they have issues with employment, housing, mental health, etc. So that's when we liaise with them and connect them to supports. Because a lot of folks I find that come through the office have a lot of shame and mistrust from just their life trauma, their history of trauma, or how they've been turned away or judged from other agencies. So that's something that we've provided for a couple years, and it keeps increasing. And at one point, IDA on Main Street had a safe supply site, but they've closed their doors, so now we're the only show in town. And lastly, our practicum student.
Yeah, so right now we have our second one. We had one at the beginning of the year and this one at the end, and she's continuing with us until April. So they're with the social work program, and they get to get firsthand experience on how it's different in the rural area versus the city, and just how trauma and needs are so complicated and multi-layered. That's a great addition to our team.
Yeah, she's been great. She helps us answer the door, does tax returns, helps Rebecca out there. So thank you for your time. We appreciate coming before you today to provide a short update. Any questions?
I do have a question.
Sure.
We've had a lot of discussion amongst ourselves and with the County of Clearwater about the need for a full-time social worker in our community. And I wanted to see if you had any insight on that, because that's sort of kind of the umbrella of services that you're providing. And what do you see? Like, obviously you've got a practicum student social worker on hand now. If you didn't have the grant for that, would that be a need that would be required, that you feel that would be a benefit for our community? Or do you think that just people don't know to come to you?
It's tough. I think the initiative of the social worker came from our partners. They approached us and said, help, and can you help us advocate? So definitely that's part of FCSS. Speaking to it, I think would be a delicate thing. But one thing I would want to say is that folks go where they're comfortable. So if they're seeking family violence supports, they will seek help from the women's shelter. If they're coming to FCSS for taxes and we have that relationship, they'll come to us. So it's really something that agencies are all experiencing, and that's why there were letters of concern and support brought forward that FCSS brought to council. That decision, I think, has budget implications, so I don't want to weigh in that way. But I do know that there's a need out there in the community because social needs are on the rise due to COVID. So whatever pre-existing issues folks had before just got worse from COVID, and we're seeing that through our office, for sure. What's the best way to do it? I don't know. you know, for sure, partnership, resource sharing, you know, being cautious with dollars makes sense. I know we can't afford it. We're already giving out a lot of grants. Primarily, our budget goes to grants. So if we were to pay for something, let's just say, that would come out of our grants budget. So there would be implications to our agencies who rely on that to keep their doors open. So it's something that, you know, health sees, the women's shelter sees, the primary care network, the food bank, the friendship center, us. Folks go where they're comfortable, they go where they need help. They definitely need help. The systems are complicated for normal people, those with mental health issues, cognitive delays, etc., trauma. It's extra hard for them. So could they use it? For sure. I just don't know the best way to do it. That's my honest answer.
Yeah, well, we're struggling with budget, and is it our responsibility, or, I mean, we're downloaded with so many things, so it's always
sure.
nice, you know, if it was an asset available, it would certainly be well used.
Well, and we saw that, right, when we had the seniors coordinator. Some of you might recall there was a 2-year grant I'd applied for. Year 1 was the senior social needs assessment. So we found out what seniors are needing and what their needs are. Year 2 was to hire someone to deal with those recommendations that the consultants came up with. So it was a 2-year project. The person was in the position just under a year, and then it was over. So just as seniors were getting used to it, just as it was getting embedded in our community, the program ended. Mm-hmm. So that's really hard with grant funding. So I would say, if anything, consistency would be key for people.
Okay.
Once they catch on, it takes a year sometimes for a program to properly launch. I don't
Okay.
know the best way.
Okay.
There's a lot of health downloading right now, and
Yeah.
government downloading for sure.
Well, I don't see any other questions, and I did want to say, you know, we're all very appreciative of all the work that you do at the office. I know how many services that you provide, and just even like the small things, the Youth Unlimited, or the Boys Unleashed and Girls Unleashed. I think it was a good opportunity for youth of different ages and situations to connect with each other. And sometimes connections, networking is like key to solving some of the other problems.
So
And,
true.
yeah. And so I really appreciate all the work that you do, and thank you so
you.
much for your presentation today.
Thank you. Anything else you wanted to say? No, we're good. Take care. Happy New Year.
Okay, Happy New Year. Thank you so much. Rebecca, I have your name written down for next time. I won't forget. So moving on in the agenda, we're at 5.1 to adopt the regular council meeting minutes of December 20th, 2022. Is there any additions or changes to those meeting minutes? Seeing none, would someone like to make a motion?
I will so move to adopt the minutes as circulated.
Thank you very much. All in favor of that motion? And that's carried. So 6.1, delegation business. The Recycling Council of Alberta, Christina Seidel and Tammy Burke. Now, I know that they didn't ask for anything, but I would like to suggest that perhaps we have a further discussion on the blue bins, seeing as what their recommendations are. How does everybody feel about having that discussion? Do you want to do that now, or should we, Mr. Kraus, how do you think we should proceed on that, based on her recommendation about not going forward with the blue bins?
Yep, thank you, Your Worship. So yeah, it's a bigger discussion with council and what council's end goal is. So I would suggest a discussion we could add to the agenda for the committee of the whole next week if council so wishes.
Okay, so I think I'd like to make a motion at this time to put that on the agenda for the committee of the whole for next week, that we discuss the blue bins based on the recommendation of the EPR presentation. Is there any discussion on that motion? Seeing none, I'll call that to a vote. All in favor of that motion? And that's carried. Thank you very much. Is there any other discussions we want to have about the Recycling Council of Alberta at this time? Seeing none, I'll move on to 6.2, the delegation from Clearwater Regional Family and Community Support Services. Is there any motions that anybody would like to make out of that? Seeing none, would someone like to make a motion to accept for information there? Counselor Hutchinson?
I'll make that motion to accept the report or the delegation as information.
Thank you very much. All in favor of that motion? And that's carried. Am I going too fast, Tracy? See here. I'm trying to follow on that. I forgot about the thing up front there. Okay. Oh, thank you so much. So moving forward in the agenda, 7.1, the RFD for bylaw procedural bylaw for the third reading. Is there any questions that we have for administration at this time? Seeing none, I think that we are ready to proceed with a motion if someone would like to make one. Sorry.
Mayor, not a motion, but just to be advised that administration is looking to see if council wants to have it live streamed as well.
Sorry, we're on 7.1.
Oh, are we not on that one?
Did you want to have a discussion about that? The procedural bylaw, we're deciding on the third reading of it, right?
That's correct, Your Worship, and I think what Ms. Breeze was inquiring about, I was going to bring up in item 13, and that was just if council would like the committee of the whole meetings live streamed, but we can deal with it under 13.
Okay, all right. Counselor Auld, did you have something about do you have a question for 7.1?
Not a question, I was just gonna make the motion that we move to third reading of the council procedure bylaw.
Thank you very much. So I just wanted to point out that because of the clarifying the procedures in there, that we won't be able to have discussion about items until after a motion is granted. And I still feel quite strongly that we should be able to have constructive discussion before coming up to, so that we can have a consensus on the motion and be able to discuss things. I know that Councillor Boniface and Councillor Hutchinson both wanted to speak on something before a motion was made, and to go with the way it is without addressing, being able to discuss things, then that will continue to happen in the meetings. And so I'm just wondering if anybody wants to, can we make, Mr. Kraus, can we make an adjustment at this time? Is that possible, or would it have to go back to first reading?
No, Your Worship, you can make an amendment prior to third reading, or as part of third reading.
So does anybody else feel, Councillor Boniface?
I agree entirely, not being able to discuss it. I'd like to hear from everybody in the room that has something to say so that I can make an informed decision before a motion's put on the table. I've had several residents come up to me and ask what were we thinking. They watched the live stream of that and they couldn't believe that we would not be willing to talk about it before we made a motion on the table. I don't see any logical reason for doing this, and would like us to scrap the whole thing.
Well, perhaps instead of scrapping it, just put in there that we're making an amendment to add that we can have discussion in the
That would be
rate.
acceptable.
So I propose a friendly amendment to that bylaw, whereas we can have, constructive discussion of an item before a motion is made. Does anybody else want to discuss that amendment? Councillor Auld.
Just as long as, once we have a motion on the table, because we've discussed it previous to the motion, we still have the ability to discuss the motion after it's been made. That's why it's in the program is once you make the motion, then you discuss the merits and vote on that motion. I don't want it to be stifled as soon as the motion is made that the discussion is over.
So you're not opposed to the amendment, you just want to make sure that there's also discussion following the motion?
Well, there's been numerous occasions where the conversation has been tried to be stopped after a motion has been made. And once you make a motion is when you're typically supposed to discuss the motion. So I just want to make sure that in the policy that it's not dictated that the conversation is over.
Okay, so are you in favor then of the motion of the amendment, as long as the discussion is allowed after the motion? I'm just clarifying what you're trying to say.
I'm okay with the way it is in the policy to begin with. If council decides that they want to be able to discuss it prior to, just as long as it's not, the conversation isn't ceased after the motion's been made.
I think that still says that in the policy, is that not correct? That there's allowed to be conversation after a motion's made? Doesn't say that there can't be, right? We're just allowing conversation about before motions are made.
Yeah, Your Worship, so right now it reads, a motion must be made by a councillor prior to any debate or vote occurring. It must be concise and ambiguous. So that's the clause that you're saying. So right now, under the procedural bylaw, what the process is, the item agenda is introduced, administration provides any information that council requests. After council has received all the information they feel is necessary, a councillor puts a motion on the table, and then councillor debates the motion.
Right,
So-
but, so what I thought was sometimes when someone asks a question that you might not have thought of beforehand, it would create a discussion over the item before the motion is made, and that's all I'm just asking to have, be allowed to have discussion before any motions are made. Councillor Boniface, did you want to?
Just adding my voice to Councillor Olds that I would agree that we have to still be able to have a discussion even after a motion's been put on the table. If we don't, then we're shooting ourselves in the foot just as badly.
Councillor Schipholt?
Excuse me, I agree. I think we should be allowed to have discussion both before and after a motion's made. Discussions will make that motion a better motion. So I would be inclined to change the procedural bylaw to leave it open for discussion both before and after a motion is made.
Okay. So, do we have to put that amendment in the motion, or is it fine the way it is? Mr. Kraus?
Your Worship, I think if council wants a rewording of that section, I would ask that you give administration time to reword it and bring it back
For third reading?
for third reading.
Okay, so do we just change the counselor would, all would have to withdraw his motion or just amend it to bring it back for third reading at the next council meeting?
The motion would need to be amended, yeah, or withdrawn.
Okay. Counselor Alt,
I'll withdraw that motion until admin comes back at the next meeting.
do you want to make a motion at this time to come back then? So,
No, I just withdrew my.
okay, so I'll make the motion for administration to amend the 2022/15 council procedure bylaw to include discussion before a motion is made. And can I allow administration to wordsmith that into the proper phrase, I was looking at you had it up there a minute ago for what part of the, yes. I don't know how to look this one.
So, Your Worship, just, if you could just bring up section 15 and 16 of the bylaw, please, Ms. Breeze. I mean, you can read this and interpret it a couple ways. If you look at 15, the procedure for the two-stage discussion of motions shall be administration presents and clarifies with council and discussion among council. And then 16, it's just saying a motion must be made before there's a debate or vote occurring. So the debate would be on the motion. So it depends how council just wants to interpret that section, I would say. I would say it could be easily interpreted that discussion can occur before the motion. If council's comfortable with that, if they want clearer wording, then we can bring it back. But if council's comfortable under
I just
Under
feel
that
that sometimes
interpretation?
questions from administration result in discussion that, and then it gives us the ability to make better motions. So like in 16, like where it says 16A, a motion must be made by council prior to any debate or voting occurring. It must be concise. It doesn't allow us to have discussion. But I don't, correct? The way it's currently stated? Are you suggesting put it in 15?
So Your Worship, I'm saying you can interpret 15 that there's discussion among council is allowed. And what 16A is saying, prior to debating a motion has to be on the table,
Oh, okay.
if council feels comfortable with that interpretation. But if they're not, then we'll go back and we'll reword it for clarity.
Because there was an issue that it wasn't clear, right? Councillor Hutchinson, did you want to make a comment?
I feel this is clear enough, the way it's written already. It says discussion amongst council is allowed prior to, and it says after the motion's made, a debate can happen, so I feel it's clear in here already.
All right, then. There was some confusion about how I was running the meeting, saying that I wasn't doing it right because of the procedural bylaw. So I just want to clarify it so that we're allowed to have discussion. Councillor Boniface.
Well, I'm gonna say I'm still confused, to be honest with you, because I'm reading this, and if this was already in there, why did we even do this other thing here? You really got me all confused now, so can someone just kind of put the ducks in a row?
Yeah, Your Worship, I think this really comes from the council orientation from our legal counsel who said there shouldn't be discussion unless there's a motion on the table. So, but it's council's bylaw. Council can run the meetings as council sees fit. So we're just, if it wants more clarity in here, we can do that. And I think it was more of the legal interpretation on a stringent Robert's rules.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Sheffield.
I would suggest Councillor All put his motion back on the table and we run with it.
So I'll withdraw the amendment. Councillor Auld?
I was just gonna say that I think it just gives everybody a chance to really know what this policy states. And it's not stifling any conversation. And if anybody in the public is watching and says that we're stifling it, we're not. Right in the bylaw, it says discussion among council. Once there's a motion made, you can debate it and then make your decision from there. So I am going to make the motion that council give third and final reading to bylaw 2022/15.
Thank you very much. Is there any Questions or discussion on that item? Counselor Shippold.
I just want to ensure that we have open dialogue both before and after the motion on that, and that's the interpretation we're going to run with at this point. So if that's it, then that's clear, then we're good to go forward.
Okay, I think it's clear to everyone. I will call that to a vote if there's no further discussion on that item. All in favor of that? And that's carried. Thank you very much. So moving forward in the agenda, the RFD for the Code of Conduct Bylaw, 7.2. Did we have any questions or concerns, Mr. Kraus?
So thank you, Your Worship. So council has asked for 3 revisions to the bylaw, which have been done and brought forward for council to consider. So the first one was that a complaint goes to council first versus straight going to the investigator. So that has been established in the bylaw. So council can determine if it's a valid complaint or not to be put forward to an investigator. Council also asked that it be considered in the bylaw that if it's a repeat offense or a breach of the code of conduct, that will be taken into considerations for future sanctions or further sanctions. So that has been included. And then council asked what could happen if a sanction is not complied with, and that section has been added in, that is considered a breach and further sanctions can occur. Now, the only question administration has was if this bylaw is retroactive, and we did comment on that. And there's just one section, one sentence that actually interprets that, and that's in section 22.2, I think. Sorry, got the wrong one up.
22.2.
22.2. And or 24.2, sorry, Your Worship. And that would be just, if that was not the intent of council, it would be just removing that last sentence where it actually says section 0, but it should say section 24.2.
Councillor Hutchinson.
I'm fine with the changes made to the Code of Conduct bylaw.
Councillor Phillips.
Everything here looks like the changes we asked for, so I'm fine with everything.
Councillor Shippold.
Mr. Kraus, can I get clarity again on what we're talking about with 24.2 in terms of retroactive and having it in there and the legalities behind that, and if it's necessary to have it there?
Yeah, no, so thank you, Your Worship. So that's a question of administration, if that was the intent of council or not. Through the discussion, we thought it was, so it was added, but just we're bringing it forward to ensure council wants this. Typically, a bylaw is not retroactive. It's pretty rare, even on provincial. So if council does not want it in here, we just amend this bylaw to strike out that last sentence.
Yeah, I think it's pretty hard to make a law that says it's retroactive to a law that was previously made. So I would feel comfortable with making the amendment and remove just that last sentence. It's not going to hurt anything else in the bylaw. Bless you.
Thank you.
Counselor Hutchinson and then Counselor Shipple.
I just think because the code of conduct was such a new document when we came into office this year, or this past year, and I think it's something that probably should have been included originally. Again, the seriousness of if you're being sanctioned for something, I feel, well, I put the motion forward, so I feel I would like to keep this in there.
Counselor Shipple.
I'd make the motion that we accept the bylaw as presented with removal of that one statement for something prior. If it's not a common practice, then need we not get into that kind of a process? So I think understanding where it is from today forward, it's there. And so I would make that motion to accept that.
Counselor Boniface and then Counselor Ald.
I agree with Councillor Shipple. You can't change the speed limit on a street in Rocky and go back and give people tickets for stuff because last week they drove quickly on it. So I think from today forward is fine. Past is past.
Counselor Ald.
I would just be curious to know, this last sentence is to do with sanctions that have been imposed. Are there any sanctions that were imposed that have not been abided by?
Well, I think that's a different discussion. Are you happy with the bylaw or not? I don't know what more you want to go with. If you're making a bylaw because there's something, you know, in your front of mind, maybe we should deal with that and not worry about the bylaw, because this bylaw changes it for the future of every council and for everything that goes on. So, you know, Counselor Hutchinson.
So my question is then, if it's not in here, how do we deal with sanctions that have not been followed through? There's no consequence, so we can say, we're going to sanction somebody for this, this, and this, and they don't follow through, they don't do it, so what? It was, the whole bylaw's a waste to even have then.
Counselor Boniface.
Again, I do not believe that you should ever make a ruling retroactive to a later date because of something that has happened. New laws are made all the time to deal with things that have come up so that they don't come up again. But what is past is past. If we could keep going back, we're never going to go forward.
Well, I don't see any other further discussion. We're, Counselor Phillips.
So the first part of this, I'm just going to read out the first part of it. So if a member fails to comply with a sanction imposed under Section 22, the failure to comply is a breach of this bylaw and may be subject to investigation and sanction under this bylaw, period. I think that's one statement, and then the sentence after that is another statement. Because the one's saying, if you have a sanction and you don't do it, it's a breach. But the second sentence is saying this applies pre this bylaw. So I think the part of, if someone doesn't want to do a sanction or doesn't want to follow through with a sanction, that should be classified as a breach. That's just my opinion. Otherwise, there's no teeth to the process. But I think we've got two separate parts of this that need to be looked at.
So like Mr. Kraus has pointed out, unless we really think it's necessary, we could remove this provision, provide sanctions to impose before the incorporation of section 24.2. Would that, you be comfortable with removing that? Because it's just not a good way to write a bylaw. Because a future sanction would be a future sanction, right? Counselor Ald.
So I agree. The first part is just a normal part of the bylaw. People are having a problem with the second sentence in there regarding it being a retroactive. I've got a problem with having sanctions and not being followed, so I'm assuming that the answer to my question is no, that the sanctions weren't followed. Would that be correct?
I don't know what you're talking about.
You had sanctions levied against you off the initial code of conduct. Were those sanctions all complied with?
As far as I understand. Is there something you feel that I've done wrong since they were
No.
imposed?
No, I just wanted to make sure that the sanctions imposed were followed through.
Okay.
So is that a yes or a no?
So,
As far as I understand, I haven't breached any of my sanctions.
But you followed through with the sanctions that were given.
As far as I understand, yes.
Okay. Then if that's the case, then that sentence doesn't need to be in there.
Okay, does anybody else have any comments? So sorry,
No,
Counselor
sorry, I-
Phillips, I was going to proceed to the motion on the table.
Just,
Did you
just
want
one
to-
more quick discussion. That's
Sure,
why-
absolutely.
That's why this is two separate things of the same paragraph that need to be kind of separated. And, and if Mayor Bache is assured that everything has been followed through from previous sanctions, then there's no reason to have that sentence in there. But the first part of it
So are
should be
you-
in there, though.
So is this about amending a bylaw or making sure that punishment has been dealt with? Because there's a big difference between the two here. If we're rewriting this bylaw to deal with things in the future, if I get out of line and you do code of conduct against me, put sanctions, and I tell you to go stuff it, then I'm in trouble. So are we dealing with business today, or is this business from 6 months ago? Because to me, this is about moving forward, making sure that in the future, if there's a code of conduct and you put a sanction against me, that I have to do it. But if this is about the mayor's sanctions from the past, and we want to make sure she follows through, let's be honest here. If she doesn't follow through with the sanctions that were put against her, someone will bring another code of conduct against her because she didn't follow through with the sanctions. So, again, we're spending a lot of time discussing something to me that is black and white. We deal with it in the future. What's the past is the past. If the mayor has not followed through with sanctions, we'll deal with it down the road.
I'll go to Counselor Shippold.
well, I agree with Councillor Boniface, and my motion stands.
So is there any further discussion, or can I call this motion to a vote? Seeing nothing, I will call this motion to a vote. All in favor? And all opposed? And that's carried. So I think, looking at my clock and my smiling face across the table, it's time for a recess. So I will have a 10-minute recess. Thank you very much. Okay, thank you very much. We will bring the meeting back from recess. And we're on new business, 8.1, an RFD for our bylaw for rates and fees. Mr. Kraus.
Yeah, thank you, Your Worship. Ms. Breeze will present this to council.
Thank you, Ms. Breeze.
Thank you, Your Honor, Council. So there's not a lot of changes again this year from last year. Council obviously went through the changes at the rates, service level, pardon me. So to go through under the comment section, it's been broken down. I think the biggest change was probably in the min section, because I wanted the FOIP fees actually reflected in the bylaw. They've never been in the bylaw, and they're now in the bylaw, if approved, of course. The other change I made in there was if we do have anybody that comes and does request a large amount of information at one time, and whether they want administration to look into gathering all the information, if it is available on our website, which most of the information, as we know, is available, if it's a quick email that somebody wants just a link to something, that's fine. We provide that all the time. But when they come to us and they want like a large amount of data, so I put in there a cost recovery for that as well. The cost recovery is very minimal. It's based on the FOIP fees, which are very, very minimal as well, just to recover some of the administration's time. We don't get these requests very often. We've had probably 2 in the last few months, and it's kind of, so I started looking at other organizations and see what they do, and a lot of the larger ones, this is how they have approached it. And so I have put that in there, like I said, to basically just cover administration time. And that was the major change for that FOIP section. Of course, the e-sign has come out because, as we know, it's on its last legs. It's still up, but I think it's going to be removed here soon. There's no changes to section B, C, D. Schedule E, pardon me. As council requested, the bulk water fees changed from $5.25 to $5.50. Cost of replacement meters was never in there before, so replacements on meters that have failed, mostly to do with property owners ignoring them, doing whatever, there's damage to them, so all of those have been added in there. Corrected the septage fee, so it was written down as a water fee, which it should have been an actual sewer fee. So basically minor changes like that have been done. Added the replacement cart for recycling because, well, we might be adding recycling unless something changes with that. Schedule F, prices of the trees have been removed because, as we know, costs are going up and down, so it's better just when somebody wants one, I believe operations just gets a quote for them, and that's what they're charged. So section G, Wes and his department have made minor changes again, a lot of wording changes. Removal, setup, takedown for funerals, that was not being charged in the past. Admin fees as per the rental policy, damage deposits, some title changes, some of the pool programs, some just little clarification with added hourly rate, because some of them didn't actually say hourly rate, now they say hourly rate, so it's a little bit more user-friendly. Instead of saying $67, we know it's per hour, not for the whole day. And of course, updated wording on the life-saving, outdoor arena and facilities. We added the central campground cancellation fee. So as Wes has it in here, it's an industry standard. There should be cancellation fees for last-minute cancellations. And then Schedule H, I guess there was no changes on that one. And then, yeah, so minor formatting, page numbers, headers, footers, your typical stuff. But other than that, not a lot changes from last year.
Thank you so much. I had 2 quick questions. I saw somewhere that NSF fees, maybe it was under Schedule A administration, were at $20, and I wasn't sure if that was covering our costs. Okay, no,
It does seem low.
yeah, it does seem low. Like, if I have an issue, like, we don't take a lot, but if I have an issue, that doesn't seem like it would cover the person having to do the accounting, to dealing with the bank fees, and then reconnecting and, getting a hold of the person that has NSF, like, there's a little bit of administration to an NSF check on our side. And so I just wasn't sure if that $20 seemed reasonable. So if it covers just the bank fees, then, but there's administrative costs to that as well, right? And the second question I had was the risers at the community center. I saw a cost for that, and I thought we discussed that those are supposed to be locked out because they're not safe for use. Am I wrong about that? So I don't think we should be putting a price in for something we shouldn't be lending out.
After following up with our building maintenance, they are safe, they're put together, so we do make sure that they are put together correctly in our use, so we do rent them out at this time.
Okay, so then the issues of missing pieces are
Yeah,
the safety
no.
of it is,
At this point, they're fine to be used.
okay, then that is a check mark. Thank you so much for checking into that, I appreciate that. Did anybody else have any questions for the fees? Excellent. Do you want to look at the NSF charge or just not worry about it at this time?
I didn't worry about it right now.
Okay, thank you. So I guess we need a motion to accept all the changes, is that correct?
Your worship, it's a bylaw, so we would need to go through the 3 readings.
Okay. Counselor Phillips.
If there's no further discussion, I'd like to make a motion that council give first reading to fees and rates charges bylaw 2023/01 as presented.
Thank you very much. Any questions or comments on that motion? Seeing none, I will call that to a vote. All in favor? And that's carried. Counselor Ald.
I'll make the second motion that council gives second reading to fees, rates, and charges by law 2023/01.
Thank you very much. Any discussion on that? Seeing none, I'll call that to a vote. All in favor of that motion? And that's carried. So I think I'd like to reserve the third reading until we find out about the NSF fees, if that's okay with everybody, and then we don't have to reread the whole bylaw. We can just make a friendly amendment to something just before third reading, if that makes sense. Counselor Hutchinson, did you want to?
Just since you said that, why wouldn't we have just made the motion to have admin change accordingly, or if necessary?
Well, it's a bylaw, so it's a law, so we could have them make it a small amendment once they find out the information, if it stays or it goes. But I think we should just wait till third reading. It won't take much to check that out. And then leave third reading. Do you want to make a different motion, or else we could continue on in the schedule of the agenda, sorry. So are we okay to continue on and leave the third reading till the next? Yep, okay. So moving forward in the meeting, 8.2, we have an RFD notice of motion from Councillor Ald. Councillor Ald, did you want to take that, or did you want Mr. Kraus to discuss that?
No, it was my notice of motion, so I'll throw it on the table and then we can discuss. Be resolved that council instruct administration do some investigating into developing the Riverside residential subdivision at the north end of town, and for council to have further discussion on development and how the town can move forward at developing that property.
And is that the one at the far end of the street where we were talking about where the dog park was gonna go? Is that one of the areas? And does the town own that whole northeast 1/4 section, blah, 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 on our desks? Or just 6 lots at the end of that road?
Your worship, it is the northeast quarter, that gray block, except for no, it is the gray block.
Because isn't Spalberg's in there somewhere? Or is it in the green?
Minus that subdivision.
But it's not shown on here?
Uh,
Because Quindell's would be number 11, right? Or are they number, maybe I got the streets wrong.
No, it's the whole quarter, it's the remaining quarter.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Counselor Shippold, whoever you are over there.
I would support Councillor All's motion.
Counselor Phillips and then Counselor Boniface.
I as well support Councillor All's motion. I think it's, it's time that we look at what it would cost or what the potential cost would be and decide if that's something we want to do or not.
Thank you. Counselor Boniface.
I definitely support Councillor Olt's motion here, and I would like to, again, I don't know how it's going to play out, but I would certainly like to see us as a town develop that property. I've had 2 inquiries from clients this week that are moving here from Vancouver, wanting to buy bare lots in our town and build. They do not wish to build a cookie cutter house. They want their own house. They have their own designs, their own blueprints. And I'm telling them, short of buying an expensive lot off of already one of these developers that build cookie cutter houses or buying an old house and tearing it down, there's not a lot we can do. So I'd certainly like to see us develop this property and have both executive style lots and regular homes lots. I think it's a wonderful idea.
Counselor Ald.
Yeah, and whether we partner with a developer to go ahead with this or whether we do it on our own, but I just think we need to, for those citizens that are moving here, like Shane, Councilor Boniface said, have an option for them if they don't want to be in the Laidlawn or the smaller lots, and have something available for these people too.
So is that already zoned by Ridger Planning?
So, your worship, it's zoned for future residential or urban reserve, I guess is what it is. And when we do have an area structure plan for that and some preliminary engineering, we would have to update costs on that engineering for council, which we'd probably have to, we would have to consult with an engineer to do that. So there would be a cost in that, but we could bring those costs back to council. So, there's 2 options that we'll bring back to council. One is the town as the developer. The other one is just put an RFP out to try to sell the land to a developer with the criteria that council would want.
And are we giving you enough information about size of lots, or that doesn't matter?
Yeah, no, your worship, we'll bring back the existing area structure plan, and if council wants to amend that, we would take that process.
Okay, thank you. That answers all my questions. I just wanted to make sure. Okay, so, does he have to re-present or just call a vote for his motion on the table? Okay, so I'll call that motion to a vote right now. Is there any further discussion? Seeing none. All in favor of that motion? And that's carried. Thank you very much. So moving forward, correspondence for action. 9.1, letter of support from Friends of Pioneer Middle School Society. So I see they're just, oh, sorry, Councillor Phillips, go ahead.
Just you know, they're asking for support from the town so that they can move forward with a project for the Pioneer School playground. I think this is a definitely they would have my full support for this letter for sure. No question.
Yeah, this is not unlike the other letters we've already given for, you know, the other schools. Counselor Schippel and then Counselor
I
Boniface.
also make a motion that we move forward in offering them a letter of support for their project.
Okay. Counselor Boniface.
I support it, that's just fine, but we've also been told that there may be things happen in the future at this location. Would this be something that would interfere with doing this?
I think this location is staying solid. Yeah. This specific location is going to be staying where it is. It's the other.
It's the other one?
It's the other ones.
Okay, thank you.
Based on that first initial meeting. So, if there is any further questions, then I'll call the motion to vote. Okay, all in favor of the motion? And that's carried. Thank you, Mr. Schippel, Counselor Schippel. 9.2, Counselor Hutchinson.
Yeah, I sent the email out for everybody, so just to kind of recap that, Sylvan Lake is hosting a roundtable kind of open house session with Travel Alberta and the Tourism Industry Association of Alberta. Indigenous Tourism Alberta are offering these town halls, so I was wanting to attend. It's January 19th from 8:30 to 11:30. The registration deadline was yesterday, so I did register. It's free to go to, but I think it would be beneficial to have somebody from council going to just see what they had. When the chamber did their forum I guess it was probably 2 months ago, and they had presented the different tourist zones that we are in, and we're in the 2 tourist areas, and they were compiling together a report as to see where we can move forward, what Travel Alberta will be doing and helping out the areas in building these areas up. So I was requesting approval from council to attend this.
So on your email, it didn't actually have the link to the original invitation with enough information. It just had like the details, but it didn't say who it was or where it was through. So I was just sort of like, didn't have quite enough information. Like you just put the time and date, but you didn't say who was hosting it or who was doing it. If it's just the Chamber of Commerce of Sylvan Lake, I don't really see a problem, but you didn't have the link to the original site for the invitation.
I'm signed up to Travel Alberta website, and it's an open invitation to anybody to attend. It does say in here who the presenters will be, and again, Travel Alberta, ITA, and TIAA are working together to create success for the province's visitors' economy. They're discussing how tourism, as a key driver for social and economic development, has the power to improve communities, create jobs, preserve nature and culture, and enhance residents' quality of life. About the tourist development zones I spoke about, and just opportunities for growth, challenges, and nuances in our area. So it is on their Travel Alberta website. They're hosting, I believe there's 8 different town halls across the province.
Yeah, it was the link to Travel Alberta that you didn't include with your email. That's what I was asking you for. I've read your email. So in case anybody else wanted the opportunity to attend it, is where I was going with that. So does anybody else have any questions or comments? Councillor Boniface.
I would certainly support Councillor Hutchinson going to this. She always brings back very good information from the things that she attends, so I'd like to hear what they have to say and what she brings back.
Thank you very much, Councillor Auld.
Yeah, 100%. I think this is great. Tina's involved in that as her regular duties, and I think Be great if she went.
Excellent. Any further discussion? Counselor Phillips,
If there's no further discussion, I was going to make a motion.
you can make a
Okay.
motion.
Then I'd like to make a motion that Councillor Hutchinson attends the Travel Alberta event in Sylvan Lake on January 19th.
Is the town of Rocky Mountain House going to be paying for her time and her travel expenses for this event?
If my understanding is if we make a motion to do that, then yes, she would be.
Yeah. So I agree that someone should be going, but I think that it should have been an opportunity for everybody, but I don't see a reason why she can't go. I just think that because it's not in the town of Rocky Mountain House, that it's a cost that we have to pay for, and we should maybe have our chamber have a similar event with Travel Alberta, because we're inside of 2 tourist zones that they're coming up with, and then we could all attend that. Is there any further? Oh, Councillor Boniface?
Maybe this is something that Councillor Hutchinson could find out then when she's there, if they'd be willing to come and put it on with our chamber.
Yeah, that'd be great. Is there any more discussion? Okay, I'm going to call that to a vote. All in favor? And all opposed? And that's carried. So moving on for 9.3, Jason Nixon's letter. So actually I brought this up last year. In his letter, he is describing how much money the Alberta government is giving our community. And last year he did the same letter, and I did talk to Mr. Kraus because I see other communities take a picture with their MLA just as a sort of like a thank you. He does ask, I ask that we can coordinate to make an announcement and communicate plans for these municipal projects. Please contact us to collaborate this incredible news. So I think that we should take the effort and thank our MLA for giving us money for our community. And, you know, then it also lets our community know how much money we're investing in our community, you know, for projects that we have going on. And things like that. Other communities did it last year when we got this kind of a letter. So, yeah, make the motion that Council District Administration contact MLA Jason Nixon's office for an opportunity to communicate the plans for this as described in the letter. Is there any discussion on this item? Seeing none, I'll call that to a vote. All in favor of that? And that's carried. Thank you very much. So moving forward in the agenda, correspondence for information. Are there any other items that we wanted to address at this time? Seeing none, would someone like to make a motion for information? Councillor Phillips, you don't have to, I could make it. Councillor Phillips.
I'll make a motion that we accept item 10.1 through 10.10 because we've removed 10.4 out
Yeah,
as information.
thank you very much. All in favor of that motion? And that's carried. So moving forward in the agenda, 11.1, the mayor's report. Does anyone have any questions or concerns about the report as presented? Seeing none, could we have a motion to accept for information? Counselor Caprero,
I will make the motion to accept the mayor's report from January 3rd, 2023,
thank you
as
very.
presented.
No, perfect. Thank you very much. No further discussion on that. Seeing none, I'll call that to a vote. All in favor? And that's carried. So further in the agenda, it's 11.2. Counselor Auld, did you wish to say anything about your report at this time?
No, it's pretty explanatory.
Does anyone have any questions for Counselor Auld? Seeing none, I'll go to Counselor Caprero.
No, but I apologize for the format. I didn't have the template on my laptop here.
Okay. And did you get that now?
Yes.
Okay. Does anybody have any questions for Counselor Caprero? Seeing none, Counselor Hutchinson? Does anybody have any questions for Counselor Hutchinson? Seeing none, Counselor Phillips?
No, nothing.
Seeing none, we'll go to Counselor Shippold.
I have nothing.
And then Counselor Boniface, did you want to make an oral report at this time?
Sure.
Yes,
That's
okay,
what I seem to
thank
do
you.
all the time. I'm going to respectfully ask that someone from administration gives me a couple hours one afternoon to teach me how to use this thing so I can actually fill out reports and do it properly and keep up on this. That's kind of my New Year resolution, to try to do better with this thing and not swear at it so much.
Okay, I will let administration get back to you between each other. Any questions? Okay, so I'll make a motion to accept for information all of the council reports for January 3rd, 2023. All in favor of that? And that's carried. Thank you very much. So the action list, 12.1, Mr. Kraus.
And thank you, Your Worship. Do you want me to go through it, or does council have any questions?
I think we'll just go to questions. Everybody's had an opportunity to read over the action list. I don't see any questions. I do wonder if I could ask if we could write a letter to the high school about, or Wild Rose School Division, about the football clock. All the footballers were at the New Year's party. And so I'm like, maybe we should just do an official letter of inquiry from town council to the Red Deer School, or the Wild Rose School Division. And would I have to make a motion, or can that just be an action list?
Your Worship, it probably should be under administrative inquiry. It would be
Okay.
the proper place in the agenda.
Okay, no, that's fine. I don't have anything else on the action list then. I'll wait till then. So there's no questions about the action list today? So could I have a motion to accept for information? Counselor Caprero,
I'll make that motion.
thank you very much. And seeing no further discussion, I'll call that to a vote. All in favor? And that's carried. So 13.1, confirmation of the committee of the whole meetings. So it seems like we have an agenda already set up.
Yeah, Your Worship, we're actually scheduled, we got items for the next 3 months lined up for council. So, but the administration's question to the council was if council wants the committee of the whole meetings live streamed.
So, they're gonna be a council meeting, just like, I think they should be live streamed, just like our regular council meetings are. Even though it's a committee of the whole, it's basically a council meeting, correct?
Correct, except council doesn't make the formal decisions there. It'll come up, it's more discussion items on topics, yeah.
I think, based on Councillor Boniface's, earlier comment that, it should be recorded because we're having discussions about stuff that we're gonna come back and vote on, right? Or would it be easier for administration not to?
Well, no, Your Worship, it's totally fine to live stream. We're well prepared for it.
Does anybody else have any comments about what they feel it should be done? Councillor Boniface?
I have no problem with doing it either way. It's, I think just to keep our citizens informed, it probably should be live streamed just so everybody's on the same page.
Is that what you're gonna say, Councillor Shippold? Okay, so then, we're going to make a motion to confirm the committee of the whole meeting for next week? Is that what we do now?
Your worship, yeah, it is scheduled, so you don't need to confirm it.
Okay.
I think if we didn't have anything for the committee of the whole, we would need a resolution for council to counsel the committee of the whole.
Thank you for
So-
clarifying that. And we don't need a motion for live streaming it. Okay. So do I just do that as for information to move on to the next item? Okay, so I'll make the motion to accept for information, the committee, confirmation of the committee of the whole meeting. All in favor of that motion? I'm sorry, I'm reading my notes.
I thought you said it wasn't a motion.
No, I'm accepting it for information so that we can go on to the next item in the agenda, right? So did you, okay, just, I missed it then because with your, the delay of confusion. Do we have any administrative inquiry? So yes, I do. I'm just wondering if we could write a letter about the football time clock in Curtis Field, like a formal letter to the school board, the Wild Rose School Board, about fixing the clock because we've had concerned citizens wonder where we're at with that, and that they are willing to fundraise to get it fixed. Would that be possible?
So, yeah, your worship, I mean, it's possible, it'd be a resolution of council, if council wants that letter, just, to confirm the scoreboard is owned and operated by the school division. So we, as a town, do not have any.
Yeah.
But-
We've got concerned
Yeah.
citizens that are inquiring about it, and whoever they talk to at the school board says it's a town issue. And I think there's miscommunication. If we had just a letter back and forth, then it clears up any information, and we don't want to pay for it, but the football group has donors that will pay to fix it if we could figure out the pathway to get that to happen.
Yeah, so your worship, just for administration, so the letter would, just clarify who owns and is responsible for the clock. And
Yeah.
advise council is receiving input from the user group.
And how could we have donors, who do the donors approach at the school division to get it resolved,
Okay.
right?
Yep.
Yeah, because we're not saying that they have to do it. I mean, if these guys want to fundraise money to get it fixed, then everybody wins, right? The school doesn't have to fix it, we don't have to fix it, it gets fixed. So I'll make a motion for administration. She says no and he says yes. Make motion? Make a motion that administration write the Wild Rose School Division with regards to the Curtis Field time clock. And is that enough? You get,
Tracy has a couple notes here as well.
okay. Okay. I could keep wordsmithing that one, but, any discussion about that motion? Seeing none, I'll call that to a vote. All in favor of that? And that's carried. Thank you very much. Do we have any other administrative inquiries? Counselor Auld.
Mr. Cross, have we, since the new council's been elected a year ago, have we reached out to Jason Nixon to come to council?
So your worship, to the deputy mayor, no, not a formal invitation to come to council.
I'd like to make a motion that we write a letter to Jason Nixon in his office to come to council meeting at his convenience, and just so we can get him at the table and have a conversation with him.
Like in a council, to a council meeting? as a delegation then?
I don't know about a delegation, but just to get, he wouldn't be presenting to us. I would like an opportunity to have some conversation with him in his office.
Well, what about if we, instead of at a council meeting, what about just, because Tuesdays he's in legislature, like in parliament, so that wouldn't work for any council meeting we have, but do you want to have like a meeting with just council and our MLA?
No, he has been here before at council meetings in the past. I don't say it has to be while he's in legislature. It can be when they're off. I would just like to have him come to council and be able to answer some questions and just conversation where they're at. And I did speak to him quite some time ago. I can't remember what function it was at, but he was inquiring about coming to council. So
The pregnancy care fundraiser. I think that's good. Is there any further questions on that? I'll call that to a vote. All in favor of that motion? And that's carried. Thank you very much. So, with that being said, I don't see any further notices of motion. Oh, sorry, Councillor Auld, did you have a second
Nope,
one?
Sorry.
I don't see any further notices of motion. Is that correct? Sorry, administrative inquiries. Do we have any notices of motion? Seeing none of those, I will have a brief 5-minute recess before we move into closed session. Thank you very much.
there you go.
You're going to have to unlive me because we have to vote to go out of closed session. So thank you very much. We've just come out of closed session, and we have one item of business. Councillor Phillips.
Yes, I'd like to make a motion that administration send the draft JUPA agreement to the school division to start discussions.
Thank you very much. I'll call that to a vote if there's no further discussion. Seeing none, all in favor of that motion? And that's carried. Thank you very much. And that concludes all our business for today. Meeting adjourned. Thank you very